Welcome to Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, the podcast that deals with all things mental health. We talk to professionals, survivors, and loved ones about their sometimes informative, sometimes uplifting, and sometimes tragic stories. I'm your host of the show, Todd Rennebaum, advocate, recovering addict, experienced sufferer of depression and anxiety, and author of the children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Hello and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. I am your host, Todd Rennebaum. Oh, that was cool. Happy summer. I hope everyone's doing well. But you know what? Everyone's so busy that I don't want you to forget to listen to the podcast. Which, I mean, if you do forget to listen to podcasts, you're not listening right now. But hey, if you are listening right now, don't forget to catch up on some of the past weeks. I spoke with Dr. Gand about medical-assisted suicide when it comes to mental health and mental illnesses, which is a real thing in Canada. I spoke with Juniper Elvin. I spoke to her about her first year living as a trans woman. And my friend Dina, who's a life coach extraordinaire. And a fella named Big Daddy Taz. He's a stand-up comedian. He's got bipolar, ADHD, OCD, and all that fun stuff. So catch up on those episodes. They're all fantastic people and great interviews. And speaking of great people and great interviews, I speak with my friend Sarah next week. We just recently become friends on Instagram. We have a mutual friend named Haley. She was also on the podcast a while back. And Sarah has, she has all types of little diagnoses, from bipolar to PTSD. She's had quite a bit of trauma in her life. And so, yeah, we talk about that. We talk about psychosis, so stay tuned for that. But for this week, I am speaking with my new friend Emily, who I believe we also met on Instagram. She is super quirky and funny and amazing, and she is sober. She's a young mother, a young wife, and she got stuck in that trap of drinking shortly after college and getting into that whole cycle of, I call it like those wine moms. You know, the people that the alcohol companies are really pushing their ads to lately about young women drinking. They're really pushing it hard. She calls it being a gray area drinker. Myself, I just call it alcohol complicating your life too much and needing to quit. I guess gray area drinker is a much easier term to say. But anyway... yeah, she describes how wonderful it is to be sober. She's only about 6 months sober right now, but she's really pushing her agenda to, get sober, for young women to really open their eyes a little bit and not get sucked into that big alcohol company trap of thinking drinking wine every night with your friends is super cool. I mean, if you can handle it, it's fine. No judgment here. I'm just saying, big companies are really trending to advertise for women these days. So anyway, this interview is a little bit different in the fact that we kind of trail off sometimes and talk about other things, including our podcast, because she is a podcaster. She has a podcast called A Sober Story Podcast, which you can listen anywhere podcasts are available. So near the end of the interview, there's a couple edits that don't really make sense, so I just put a little beep sound in between them just to break up our conversation a little bit. But it flows. It's good. And another thing is, I kind of forgot to turn on my good microphone again. God damn it, this audio software I use is driving me nuts. Anyway, you can hear what I'm saying. It's just not as good a quality as I'm saying right now. Which is really unfortunate. I feel embarrassed, and it's just dumb of me. So anyway, there's that. Okay, without further ado, I give you Emily.
Well, first of all, I love your podcast, and I think that you have, as we've been talking about, amazing guests and very important topics and issues that you've covered. And I'm honored to be here. And the reason I'm here today is to discuss my journey to sobriety, and to share with your listeners a little bit about this concept of gray area drinking. Before we dive into that, though, I definitely want to have your listeners get to know me a little bit and who I am. So I'm 34 years old. I live in Southern California with my husband and my 2 kids and our 2 dogs. And my daughter's doing piano lessons right now. We've got a pretty cush life, pretty great life. Okay. Um, and I definitely have had privilege in my life as a cis white woman. Um, and I would say that my drinking really started in college. So I'd always say that my drinking, I would always describe it as 2 different entities, like my college day drinkings, and then after I graduated from college and started my adult life, quote unquote. So before college, I would just say that I grew up in an affluent town in Southern California, a little outside of San Diego. And I just was in like this sea of rich white people. And my family, not so much really rolling in the dough. I mean, we're talking about kids that were like rolling up in like BMWs and like Mercedes, and kids that were going like, to USC and just amazing schools. And I just really did not feel like I stood out at all. And I had these like feelings of like inadequacy, even though I was a cheerleader for a couple of years. If you can imagine that, Todd, me, a cheerleader.
Give me a second. Yes, I can.
Yeah. So, I mean, like maybe it was all in my head, but like, I think what really like summarizes encapsulates like my high school experience was that I think it was like my senior year, and they gave out like papers during one of our periods about if you're going to graduate and like just like your standing, right? And I remember looking at my standing of my class, and it was a large class. I think we had like 800 kids in our senior class.
Good Lord, I had 40.
Right. 800 kids or so. And I remember looking at my standing of like the number where I was. And I kept on like looking at the number, and I was like, holy shit. Like I literally was smack dab in the middle of my class, literally. And so like, that's how I felt, just like awash in just like these people doing nothing to stand out. It was like, I couldn't compete with these people with all this money and everything. And so I think that I carried that with me. I carried that into my college experience, and I had a lot of expectations for myself, but then I didn't have like the self-esteem to meet those expectations. And so
I relate.
Yeah. So I fucking love drinking because it was such an escape, and I'm a little person, not a little person. I am a petite. I am a petite person. I'm like 5'2". I don't weigh too much, and so I would just like, it would not take me long to get intoxicated, not too much.
Cheap drunk.
And it was
perfect.
Yeah, baby. Cheap date, cheap drunk. And I loved it. And it was my excuse to just let go. And I loved it. I loved letting go and not having any inhibitions, and just not feeling the stress, not feeling the disappointment in myself, not feeling the worry, the anxiety of everything that life was throwing at me at that time.
Was this like with other people, like partying and stuff, or was it just sitting alone, just loving it?
No, I was a sorority girl. I surrounded myself with, people. I wanted to make sure that I, knew where the parties were, and yeah, definitely always with people. And there was always hard alcohol when I was in college, just like cheap vodka, and it was never about the taste of the alcohol. There's some people out there that like love the taste of alcohol. If I could have pressed a button and been intoxicated, that's what I would have done. It had nothing to do with like holding a drink in my hand or anything. It was like, let's line up these drinks, take these shots, and I'll be good for the rest of the night. I should also mention a big thing that happened in my life when I was younger was that I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So I live with an insulin pump. I test my blood sugar on a very regular basis. I have what's called a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, which, tells me my blood sugar every 5 minutes. As you can imagine, like, drinking and diabetes just doesn't mix. It just is not a good thing for my health. And, but that was, when you're, 18, 19, 20, you don't give a shit. You just want to party and you just want to be like everybody else. so definitely during that time, my blood sugar was just like spike super high. And then like I'd be hungover and then be eating horrible food. And it was just hard on my body. And I could only imagine how it impacted my studies. I mean, like I didn't do I didn't do as well as I could have in college.
What were you taking?
I was studying to become a teacher. So I was just taking like, I mean, it wasn't like I had like this gnarly workload or anything like that. But I mean, but going back to that, like originally I went to college to become a dietitian. I got to chemistry and I was like, I'm scared. I can't do this. And I just like, again, it was like this feeling of like, I can't do this. This is too hard. And so I switched my major to something that was a lot easier. And I mean, I'm a teacher now and I love it and everything. And I'm happy with how where I like my studies led me career wise, but it's just interesting how, yeah, as soon as I was met with like a challenge, it was like, ooh, this is scary. I don't think I can do this. And I switched my major. So partied hard in college. When I graduated from college, what people need to know is that when I graduated in 2009, we're in a recession and no teaching jobs to be had. And I started dating my boyfriend. And I really saw him as a rebound. I'd broken up with another boyfriend and I started dating my boyfriend. And he was somebody who had previously dated like in high school. And I'm like, oh, this is just going to be like, it's just going to be fun. No, like we ended up getting married and having 2 children in very rapid succession. And so I went from living the sorority girl party lifestyle where my parents were literally footing all of my bills. I was so lucky. They literally told me, Emily, your job is to go to school. And what I do, I just like went and partied. I did get my degree. C's do get degrees, people, right? So I went from the college lifestyle to like within like, 18 months of graduating from college, being pregnant. So I did get married when I was pregnant, about 4 months pregnant.
Classy.
And by the time that, happens.
Kidding him.
Here and there. And by the time that we had our first anniversary of our wedding, I was already pregnant with our son, our second child. And so it was just I'm still dealing with, I've said this before, I'm still dealing with like, I don't know if it's trauma, but there was a tremendous amount of stress and loneliness and just like being 24, having a baby, growing another baby. My husband is in law enforcement. He is working 12-hour shifts and he has this commute of, an hour plus to get to work. We lived in the middle of nowhere and it was really, really hard. So that's something I'm still grappling with and I'm still, thinking about, in my life. So interestingly, when I graduated from college, because I associated drinking with partying and with social aspects and everything, I really did not drink when I left college. I remember mourning the loss of my life as like a partier and stuff and thinking, gosh, like I don't want to be that drunk girl in a bar. Like this life has to come to an end. And I made amends with that and proceeded to just hop right into motherhood and being married and all that stuff. So my daughter was 3 and my son was about to turn 2. And I'd been home. It's so funny. People are like, oh, you're going back to work. And I'm like, no, never have I worked. Like, this is my first job. Yeah. So I was offered a teaching job and I had an aging credential. So I'd gotten my teaching credential and I had this aging credential, no experience. And I was offered a job where my mom worked. It was an hour away from my house, but I felt compelled to take that job because I was like, who else is going to hire you right now? Given your lack of experience, you should just take this, Emily, and like work with it. And so I have a 3-year-old. I have a 2-year-old. I'm now commuting an hour down to my job for one of the most stressful teaching jobs that I have ever experienced in my entire life, is dealing with a demographic of students that have experienced a lot of trauma in their own life. And with that comes a tremendous amount of like negative coping skills that these kids have developed. And I was spending so much of my day correcting behavior. There were times we had to like evacuate the class because there was a kid outside who was like having a meltdown and was like smacking a stick against the door. I was like, Todd, is that you? Just kidding. Just kidding. So it was really, really hard. And so around this time was also the time when like craft beer was blowing up, right? And I was never, ever a beer drinker, but my dad really liked craft beers, IPAs and everything. And so I started to dabble in drinking beer. And I loved it. And I started to drink for the taste. Like, I love this. I always looked at it like, this is like a milkshake. It's like this delicious, just like the treat. I absolutely love it. At this point, wasn't buying anything and keeping in my fridge at home or anything, but it was just, something that we enjoyed, when we were out. As time progressed and, things happened in your life and everything, and stress compounds and stuff, and your marriage goes through things, that drinking became more and more pronounced in my life. A really big turning point in my life was in June of 2018, and I discovered that my husband was having an affair. And thinking back to what I've told you about my life, I had the most stable upbringing. I had parents who would never let me down. I had parents who always put me first. Always, they were such adults, And I thought like, oh, you just grow up and you like know how to make these decisions. And now I know like, no, like you have to work very hard to make good decisions for your family and everything. And so when I found out that my husband was having an affair, it was without a shadow of a doubt the most earth-shattering experience of my world fell apart. To go from my parents' house to my husband's house, not to mention the fact that I had some codependency issues with my husband. I relied on him for everything, financially, emotionally. I have these 2 small children and I am basically like stuck in my house, and like he was everything to me. Right. And obviously we had to work through that. So when I discovered that was happening, my drinking just skyrocketed. I was living in a state of constant adrenaline. Like I did not know what was going to happen with my life. I went back and forth. We're going to sell the house. We're not going to sell the house. I'm going to try to stay here. I'm going to have, because in my mind's eye, I was like, we're going to divorce. That's what's going to happen. And so because of this constant state of like adrenaline, my appetite was like, it was like gone. And so I wouldn't be eating like at all throughout the day. And so 1 to 2 craft beers would fuck me up and I would be like a hot mess. Also around this time, I was going out with friends to wineries. I was like, hanging out with friends at their houses and everything, blacking out drunk, throwing up. I was just hot mess express, to be perfectly honest. I cannot believe that we were able to keep our marriage together. It took I actually moved out for a time. I needed that for myself. I needed to grow up and to kind of also show my husband, like, this is what our lives are going to be like. You are going to have custody of your children for half the time. We're not going to live together. And it was something that I needed to do. And there was some like growing up that I needed to do on my own. So I did move out for a time. I applied for an apartment. I paid for the apartment with my own money. That was pretty intense.
Your husband stopped seeing the other person during this?
Yes. Okay. So it was horrible. Like, I think when I said like things are over between us, he continued to see this other person for a time period, but she was also married to somebody else, and that person was making my husband's life a living hell. And I think he kind of recognized like, wow, this is not the life that I want for myself. This is a lot of drama and everything. And so he walked away from that when he kind of recognized that it was just like, I think it was just kind of like, oh, like this isn't, I don't think he ever had, it was never like he was going to like become like, you know, her kids like stepdad or anything like that. I think it was really escapism for him because again, we were just going through, I mean, gosh, we got married. I was 23, he was 26. We turned around and had children right away. And I think that we didn't have a chance to like get to know each other that well before we, you know, dove into parenthood and everything like that. And it was just like, you know, yeah. So I think it was about escapism for him. But we're able to claw back our marriage, and I'm happy to say that like we are in a good place. And I never, gosh, I think I told you before, like someone's like, this is going to make you stronger. And I wanted to sock them in the face. I wanted to punch them directly in the throat and be like, fuck you, don't tell me.
There's someone
that.
at your
Don't
door behind you. Sorry, I don't know if it's a dog or a kid. And
Claire, what do you need? Okay, where are you going to go? Okay, bye. Love you.
Do they know stuff?
Yes and no. Like they were obviously there.
Maybe you don't want to be talking to others.
No. They were obviously like there when I got my apartment and everything. My kids were like young, like in like first grade and like kindergarten. And now my daughter's like going to be in fifth grade, and we'll drive by the apartment. It's in town, and she'll be like, that's where you used to live. Like, why did you move there, Mom? Like, she still kind of doesn't know. And I'm like, and I explain it like, it's just something that I needed to do at the time. It's something that I just needed to do. And so, and I mean, like, I'm not, as they get older and everything, and I'm sure they'll maybe figure it out on their own. I'm not sure.
Well, maybe she knows now.
Yeah. And you know, the thing is that I don't know. I'm pretty open and honest with my kids about a lot of things, you know, so we'll see what happens with that. But so the drinking just like it ramped up during that time period. And of course it tapered off after things got a little bit healthier between us and everything. I ended up moving back home, and we went to counseling and just worked on our communication. I worked on myself, you know, making sure that like I understand now, like no one is responsible for my happiness besides myself. And that's something that I like really hold close to myself. Like I have to take care of me. I have to be happy. I have to create the life that I want for myself. And that was like a learning experience for me. I can't rely on other people and then be disappointed when they don't do something that I want and blame them. I think that was some of our issues as well. So we are together. We're happy. We have a beautiful house, beautiful family, and we're doing well. But my drinking did not end there. I continued to drink, and basically what ended up happening was that I was continuing to drink. I was continuing to drink at least one drink by myself every single day. And it was this heavy beer, and I was using it as an emotional crutch. Like I would get home, I'd be stressed, and I would have this drink, and I would drink it like pretty soon after I got home from work. Haven't had anything to eat since lunch. And it would just numb me out. And I could just keep on, you know, just go on with my life and make dinner and fold laundry and everything. And it was like this like numbing agent, just like this salve over my life. Like just, yeah. But then the more problematic part was the fact that when I would go out with friends, it would be like, hey, is today the day that drunk Emily is going to come, or are you going to behave? And so it was like this thing of like, are you going to get wasted today or are you not? And what ended up happening was that my kids started to get really freaked out about me going and being out with my friends. And my kids, especially my daughter who's older, would be like, Mom, only one drink, okay? Only one drink. And I'd be like, okay. And she was getting really nervous about it. I would be going anywhere with friends, no matter what time of day. Maybe I'd be going to have breakfast with friends or go like play like tennis or do something active outside where there would be no alcohol. And she'd be like, Mom, is alcohol going to be there? So my children were becoming extremely just very worried about me. Okay. And my husband grew up with a mom who is an alcoholic, and she was a binge drinker and stuff. And so when I would drink, my husband reacted really strongly to it and was extremely disappointed and just like made a big deal about it. I think that there's some people out there, if their wife or their spouse gets drunk, you're like, whatever, right? And that was not our case. Our case was like, it was causing problems in our marriage. And his reaction in turn freaked out our kids even more. It was just a bad situation. So at this point, I'm drinking a drink a day. I'm drinking more on the weekends. I remember there was like an event where I was like, I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to drink. And then someone offered me a drink, and without even like, my brain didn't even register. I was like, yeah. And I completely forgot that I had even said like, I don't want to drink. So in my head, I'm starting to like tell myself like, this isn't good for your health. Like this is horrible for your diabetes. This is causing problems in your marriage. Your kids are starting to get freaked out about this, Emily. I am upset with myself for how much I'm drinking. I'm like looking at my days and I'm like, oh, well, I didn't have a drink on Tuesday. Like that was it. Like, it was like, yeah, you got Tuesday, Emily, but every other day was just like drinking. And so things came to a head in January. We're going to go on a camping trip in the middle of nowhere. And the people that we were camping with were drinkers, right? And by this point, I hadn't been super drunk in a while. And I remember feeling really righteous on the drive over and being like, oh my gosh, these people are probably going to get so drunk, and we don't drink like that. I haven't been drunk like that in a really long time. And I remember my husband turning to me and he was like, you're right. You haven't, Emily. And I'm so proud of you. And I remember like him saying that to me. And I just, even to this day, I don't know how that hits me. Like some part of me is like, yeah, I'm proud. I was proud. But then part of me is like, oh my God, like the fact that he has to say that he's proud of me for not drinking and getting drunk. It was just like a weird feeling. I was like, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. It was kind of like, okay, interesting. And of course, we go to this camping trip and I get wasted. And I also believe that I take Zoloft, and I believe that night, because my drinking had caused a lot of issues with my anxiety, believe that I also abused my Zoloft that night. I think I remember going to look at my pill box the next morning to take my medication, and like half the pills were gone. I was like, what is going on? And so I woke up the next morning in that state of just like panic of like, what did I say? What did I do? My daughter is crying. My daughter turns to me and she's like, Mom, why did you do that? Like, why did you? And my husband is mortified. He had just told me the night before, like, I'm so proud of you for not drinking. And here we were. And it was just like this point where I was like, and I think I'm done. I think I don't want to do this anymore to my family. So at first I did stop drinking because of my family, stopped drinking because of my children, because of my husband, and because of the issues that it was causing in our marriage and in our family. And I was sick of scaring my kids. And I stopped, and didn't have any issues with stopping. It wasn't like I had any, I mean, I had cravings. It was definitely a habit that I had formed. And while, the times when I was used to drinking, I replaced with exercise, because I do like exercise. But after a while, I didn't need that anymore. And I just drink a shit ton of like sparkling water and all that stuff. But I'll tell you what, I decided that I was going to start this podcast. I wanted to understand how other people came to choose sobriety, because I think these stories are fascinating. So I started this podcast. It's called A Sober Story Podcast. And I interview people, and and they share with me just like their journey to sobriety, starting all the way with childhood, all the way up. And it was through talking with these people that I started to recognize that I wanted to stay sober, not just for my kids, not just for my marriage, but for me. And I recognized how much the drinking was impacting my health and impacting my mental health in terms of my anxiety and stuff. And now, I'm taking it one day at a time. I still think it's kind of freaky and like totally like scary to be like, oh, I'm never going to have a drink for the rest of my life. But as people say, just take it one day at a time. I'm choosing not to drink today, and we'll see what I say tomorrow. But I think that I will choose not to drink tomorrow.
Hi, everyone. Just a quick break here to tell you about a couple wonderful podcasts that I think you might like. If you enjoy mental health podcasts, which I assume you do because you're listening to this one, then I think you should listen to the Rainy Days podcast. That's with host Jason, and he was even a guest on my show here not too long ago. Jason aims to discuss and explore mental health unapologetically through shared living experiences and projects centered around mental health and well-being. Jason's a great guy. He's got great guests. He talks all about all types of things mental health, and he's from the UK, so he talks real fancy like, so I think you'll like that. That's the Rainy Days podcast. Another amazing podcast is a Sober Story podcast with your host, Emily. She is also an amazing host, and she also has amazing guests. There's a powerful story behind each person's journey to sobriety. Join us each week to hear the stories of people from all different walks of life as they share how they became sober. And I'm telling you right now, as someone who's been sober almost 6 years, it's true. I have yet to meet someone who does not have an interesting story about how they got sober. So, the Rainy Days podcast and a Sober Story podcast. Check those out. Rate and review them.
Are you doing this on your own? Is there any like AA meetings or?
So, I do not. My drinking never led me to having a DUI. I mean, God knows, like in college and everything, I drank and drove, but it never led me to a DUI. It never led to hospitalization. It never led to me losing a job or drinking on the job or showing up drunk to a job. There was no huge thing. In fact, no one in my life said, Emily, cool it with the drinking. You should stop drinking. Even my husband, like even when I would get super wasted, he wouldn't be like, you need to stop drinking. So I don't really feel a connection with AA. I use sober podcasts to help me. I also feel like talking with people for my own podcast has been such a cool tool. It's like this reinforcement to hear other people's stories. That has been amazing for me. And then I've read a few books. I can't remember what they're called right now, but mostly it's just, talking with other people, being active in the sober community online on Instagram through my podcast. And just like learning more about like truly what alcohol is. And when you find out like it's a toxin that, there's no safe amount of alcohol to drink, right? That's what they say, and just problematic drinking has become so normalized in our society that, when you walk away from it, you're just like, wow, like more people should do this. More people should try this. So that's what I've been doing. And so far it's worked. And at the end of this month, it'll be 6 months. So I'm pretty stoked about that.
You are really fresh.
Yeah. That's all January of this year. And yeah, totally. And honestly, I think I might have told you this. Like when I started the podcast, I was more excited about starting the podcast and having like kind of like this like podcast in this format that I hadn't really seen a lot. I was more excited about the podcast than I was about like my sobriety. I was like, hey, we'll see what happens with sobriety thing. I'll just interview sober people and see what happens. But it was through interviewing all of these people and talking with all these people that I was like, holy shit, like this is the life that I want to lead for myself.
Mm-hmm. You want what they have.
Amen. I really do. I want to be present. There's just a lot of things, a lot of incidents that I think back and I just wasn't present, and I'm tired of numbing myself of feelings that I deserve to feel and that are important to feel. Like so often you're numbing yourself to these negative feelings of boredom or loneliness, it's like it sucks to have to deal with those feelings. But that's like what I deserve, is to work through those feelings and figure it out versus just numb yourself.
I know that feeling of trying to avoid feelings, and it's like now that I'm sober, and it's like I just deal with those feelings as they come. It is so much fucking easier just to deal with those feelings as they come than to suppress them and have them show up when you don't want them, and to keep suppressing them with alcohol. Like, so I went to treatment, and I remember the big thing that they would always say is like, you have to learn how to feel your feelings. And I was like, I know how to feel feelings. Like, who? Like, I didn't get it. I actually didn't. It took me like a year to even get it. I was like, I have no idea. Like, I feel angry and I feel all types of emotions. But I wasn't. It was like, oh, I didn't even know how to feel happy, how to feel just content, how to just have a nice day. Like, my default was misery. It was like, no, I guess I don't know how to feel happy. I would feel happy, and then it'd be like, whoa, I'm starting to I feel pretty good today. And then it was like instantly, oh, you feel good. Something, you know. You know that term, this shall pass too? Or this too shall pass, I mean. That's how I felt with happiness. It was like I couldn't enjoy happiness because this too shall pass. So what's the point of like? It was just chaos. Anyway, so what I'm trying to get is I relate.
Yeah. And for me, I feel like I didn't know how much I was using alcohol like as a social tool. And I've discovered that I'm definitely not as extroverted as I thought. I will get to a social event and everything. And I realize now that I used alcohol to sit and to stay in a situation that I really didn't want to sit and stay in. Like, I'm definitely more of like, I want to get up and I want to talk, and I don't like to sit and just like schmooze for a long time. And I use the alcohol to force myself into that. And now I'm like, okay, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go. And I think I'm ready to leave. And that's been really cool. And another thing that I've noticed about myself is that like, I'm just, even when I was still drinking and I was not under the influence, right? I'm like just having a conversation with coworkers and everything, or anyone. I felt like I had to be like this, like I had to like be like this, had to like throw in these like zingers, or I had to say something that was like controversial, or I had to do something like, bow, 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 like, look at me, you know? And it was like, I had to just like perform or something. And now I am so much more content with just like sitting and talking and not trying to be like the funny person or trying to be, you know, controversial or anything like that. It's just like, I'm just so much more of a content and calm person now in my life. So that's been really cool to experience as well.
About the social stuff, it's my kind of friend group has shrunk since I've gotten sober. And not that I didn't have good friends before, but it's like, it's gone from quantity to quality. And that whole schmoozing thing, I didn't like it either. I was good at it when I drank. But now it's like I crave connection with people as opposed to just like, hey, how's the weather? Hey, yeah, hey. And then you perform a little bit, and it's like, hey, that guy was great. And it's like, hey, I like that guy because he laughed at my joke. Now it's like I have actual conversations that are meaningful with people, and it's like, yeah, it's a lot more fulfilling.
100%. Yes. I'm really not into small talk. I'm like, tell me about your relationship with your parents. Are you happy? Like, you know, and so, yeah, I feel like my conversations that I have with people are a lot more meaningful, as well. And that's been, and yeah, it's quality over quantity, most definitely.
Tell me about gray matter drinking. Is that what it's called?
Gray area drinking. Yeah. So going back to this notion that like my drinking didn't really like create these like huge problematic things in my life, right? Maybe I argued with my husband and everything, and my children were freaked out over my drinking. But again, no DUIs in my past, haven't lost jobs. No one told me you should stop drinking, Emily. Gray area drinking is drinking that falls between the spectrum of social drinking and dysfunctional drinking. So it's that murky area in between, right? And so for some people, drinking the way that I drank is absolutely no problem, right? But for me personally, it was starting to become an issue. And in my own head, I was like, I don't like this anymore. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. But I felt it was like such a habit that I had created. It was such a persona that I had created. Like, yes, let's get the beer. I love this beer, love this IPA. Oh, let's try this craft beer. And so it's like this spectrum of like, you're not like the guy sitting on the corner with a brown paper bag, but you're using alcohol, especially for women, as an emotional crutch. Okay. So that is how gray area drinking is defined. It's not causing huge problems in your life, but you're kind of like, I'd like to change my drinking habits. And you can fall into gray area drinking the moment that you say to yourself, I don't like this anymore, or like, maybe this is an issue. You're like in gray area drinking. And I would encourage people who feel that way to seek support. Now, maybe AA is not going to be the thing for you, but there's so many like resources online and such a community online for you to turn to, and for you to just share your story or reach out to people and say like, hey, this is what I'm experiencing. There's gray area drinking like accounts and stuff on Instagram, where maybe you can like see if you fit into that type of drinking.
I don't know what I was. I mean, I did end up in the hospital because I was suicidal, but I mean, same thing. I didn't have a DUI. I didn't lose a job. Well, no, I guess you know my story. I guess maybe it was a little more than gray area, but I remember being in treatment and like hearing other people's stories, because you're in there with like people that are on meth for 10 years and stuff too, and it's like, and you're hearing their horrible traumas, and then I'm comparing myself to them. I was like, should I be here? Like, I didn't go through this intense traumas, and I didn't do this, and I did.
Yes.
And my group leader at the time pulled me aside because I said something like that. He's like, dude, a drug is a drug is a drug, first off. Secondly, you cannot compare trauma. You cannot compare pain. And you cannot compare stories. You can't compare your sobriety with other people's sobrieties. You can't compare addictions. He said, stop it. It's not an accident that you're here. Like, no one accidentally is like, whoops, I think I'm in the wrong place here. Like, you need to be here. And and I'm like, I know people that drink way more than I did, but they could handle it for whatever reason. It was what it was doing to me that caused that made it an addiction. It was affecting my daily life. It was starting to affect you, like even with you, it was starting to affect your relationship. It was starting to affect your children. If you stuck with it, maybe it would have turned into, the brown paper bag hobo. So anyway.
Any level of drinking that's negatively impacting your life is valid. And I think that's what needs to be. That is the message that I want listeners to get across, is that, we think of alcoholics, like you said, as like the brown paper bag guy who like has like, lost his house and is homeless and everything. And that's like not the case. If you are drinking and it's bothering you and you want to change your story, and that's valid, and you are able to reach out and get help and everything. And like you said, don't compare yourself to other people. I think that that's something that I dealt with, or I struggled with. I was like, I felt like this imposter syndrome, like, oh my gosh, here I am, this little like white girl in her like nice house and everything. And here I am whining about, my little alcohol problem, quote unquote, but it was causing me issues in my life. And that deserves like a space. And,
absolutely.
And that's important to share. Like, there's no stereotypical, like, yes, you deserve, help, but you don't, So that's what I want people to hear.
Yeah. There's no exam where it's like, oh, you failed. You got 4 out of 10. That means you're an alcoholic. I mean, everybody's different. And whatever.
Yeah.
What do you think of these wine mom kind of memes? And there's even Instagram accounts of like moms getting together and doing the whole wine thing. And do you feel like
I feel like alcohol, problematic drinking is so ingrained in our society. especially for women to lean on alcohol, that it's just such a commonplace kind of a thing that we joke about and everything. And it's so unfortunate, I don't like it. And I think that I'm sure that like the large alcohol companies just absolutely love it, but to those people, I would say like, you deserve more. Like you deserve happiness and joy and beautiful things in your life without having to use alcohol to get there. That's important. And you deserve friendship that doesn't revolve around using a substance to cope and to bond.
Word.
Yeah,
it's so. Yeah, that shit drives me nuts. Like right now, it's like a huge trend that companies and memes and all this stuff are coming out and like they're targeting women. They're targeting young mothers. They're like, come have wine with your friend on every night. It's like, I'm a wine mom, and like it's all like T-shirts and all over the place. It's like, if you really said what it was like, forget about your kids and your crappy husband. Come get numb with me, and we'll bitch. It's like,
let's make those stickers, Todd. Let's make those stickers. Pass those out. Let's pass those out at the farmer's market. Here you go. You can have this with your kombucha. I completely agree. And but I am very happy. I do feel like there is a sober movement going on. We have discussed the fact that there are so many alternatives to alcohol in terms of alcohol-free beer and just different spirits out there that are alcohol-free. And there are actual like alcohol-free like tequila options and stuff. Yeah. It's yes. I have to send it to you and everything, but like for those individuals that are not triggered by the actual like taste, and it's more so just about like the experience of having, I don't know, that is such an option. And I just,
it is the taste for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone else is sitting around drinking nice wine and I'm having a black coffee. Like, this isn't quite the same.
Right. Yeah. It isn't. But there's just a lot of options out there for people. And, I encourage people to be brave enough to walk away from that lifestyle and to find true connection with others. And this is what I will also say to listeners is that you can't be quiet about it. I mean, you can be quiet about it, but it's okay to tell other people you no longer drink. So a couple weeks ago, I had a neighbor who invited me over for margarita. And I was really nervous because she didn't know that I didn't drink. And I find that being like in a party situation is like really a whole lot easier to just kind of like go under the radar and everything. But when you're in that one-on-one situation, it's like, you have to like look that person in the eye and be like, no, I'm not drinking, or no, I'm not going to take that. And so I did. And I told her like, hey, I actually don't drink. And it was so cool. And she's like, oh, okay, here's you want sparkling water? And I was like, hell yeah. And we had great conversation.
Did you talk about me?
I said, let me tell you about Todd and his mustache.
Anyway.
Let me tell you. So it was just really cool. And what I'm saying is that you need to let the people around you know, like that is a goal of yours, because sometimes you forget that you're not supposed to be drinking. And like, that's a weird kind of a concept. Like, remember that when I was being quiet about it and I was like, I'm not going to drink. And as soon as someone offered me a drink at that Christmas party, I was like, hell yeah. Completely forgot that, like, so it's okay to be loud about it. You don't have to like scream it from the mountaintops, but it's okay to just be like, this is just who I am, or I'm just trying it out, or I'm just, not drinking right now. So don't be embarrassed about it, is what I would say.
I'll tell you anything. It's like, yeah, I used to be a real alcoholic and a dickhead, and now I'm sober. Yay.
Well, I'm still dealing with it. Like I'm a teacher and I'm going to go back to work in August and everything. And I haven't, just being at like barely 6 months, not even to 6 months, I have to be honest, like there haven't been so many opportunities for me to be like, hey, I don't drink anymore.
Except online.
I'm ready. Except online. Yeah, exactly. And with my neighbor. And that's the other thing. So I don't do official AA meetings, but I do attend online support groups, like women's support groups and everything that you can just like, log on to and everything. So that's something else I do. That's another resource that I enjoy, just talking with people about it. So I like that too.
With my experience, I'm almost 6 years sober. I'll be 6 years in November.
Wow. 6 months, 6 years.
666. We need another 6 in there somehow. I used to drink 66s.
Hey.
Oh, that's 4 6s.
I got nothing.
I don't want to sound like I don't.
Preachy. Tell me.
It can get harder before it gets easier.
Mm-hmm.
I found it's like they say 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, and 5 year are like where it kind of gets hard again. Especially for me, it was 2 years. I was like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, I wasn't like tempted to go out and drink, but I was like just grumpy and miserable with my life. I was like, no, if I'm going to be grumpy and miserable, it makes me be drunk and grumpy. And, I was like, so I'm just saying, just keep at it. I'm proud of you. You're doing a good job. You're doing a great thing with your podcast.
Thank you.
You're doing a good thing speaking to me about it. So just hang in there. And it may get crappy again, but you're doing all the right things. Support groups. You're online. You're doing good stuff.
I'm trying, but yeah, I recognize that and I haven't gone through any like huge life-changing things. Like my parents are still healthy and here and everything. And I do recognize that I am going to be challenged and I do know that. And so I'll cross that bridge when I come to it and use my tools and everything. But for now in my life, I've really enjoyed removing alcohol from my life. It's been a really positive thing. And I hope that I continue on with it and use my tools and stuff and talk with more cool people like you, Todd.
Well, good luck talking to people more cool than me. But anyway,
I know. Impossible.
I've had a couple things happen in my life since being sober, and I gotta tell you, I couldn't imagine going through those things drunk. It was like your brain goes, oh man, I should just get drunk and that'll be easier to deal with. It's like being completely in the present, clear of mind, and dealing with that shit is so much easier than dealing with it, plus a hangover and whatever embarrassing shit you did that day and whatever,
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
They call them tests, but it's not really. It's a super easy test to go through them. For me, anyway, right? This is my experience.
Yeah. That makes sense. Sense.
And I mean, I still have anxiety and I've dealt with depression and stuff, but again, it's like, okay, now add alcohol on top of this. Like, no.
Yeah. So I started taking Zoloft in like the height of the pandemic and still totally drinking and everything. And I was like, I think I'm gonna have to up my dosage of my Zoloft. Like, this is not working. And then I stopped drinking. And I was like, oh, I get it now. Like, this is the problem when you drink and you take these medications. Yeah, no, I love my podcast. I love the people I've talked with. I've had like life-changing moments talking to people on my podcast. And it's been very, very, very powerful. And like, just when you think that like you haven't, like you learned everything. I mean, of course I haven't learned everything that there is to learn. You just think like, oh, or I'll go to like an episode with like a preconceived notion about a guest. Right. And then like you hear their story and you're like, whoa, like, well, that is nuts. And I'm really making a concerted effort in my podcast to make sure that I am including people that look differently from me. So it's important to me that I am reaching out to people of different demographics, different skin color from me and everything, so that we can hear the stories of people from all different walks of life. That's important because obviously addiction affects everybody. So
Even
I'm
tall
looking
people?
for even tall people.
Whoa.
And little people and every type of people, yeah. So so that's another really cool thing, is to talk to people who are different than me. I miss, and I might have said this before, that I miss the option of just like zoning out and like numbing out. But like now I know better. So it's like I miss the ignorance of just, like of the masses of just like, this is absolutely fine, and now it's like I know better. I know it's causing me anxiety. I know this is only going to cause more problems. And it's like, God damn it. Sometimes I want to just have the easy way out.
Yeah. In treatment, they call that getting comfortable in your own skin. So being able to just sit there and like boredom is like how to deal with boredom. Because in treatment, you're not allowed your phone and stuff. So some people, it's funny because they give you lots of homework, lots of assignments during the evenings and weekends. And sometimes they would like give a certain person, because some people like that, right? Like they have to keep you zapped. So they'd be like, you have no homework. Yeah, they'd be like, this weekend you have no homework. You don't have to do any of the assignments. Your assignment is just living in your own skin and just being. And it fucking drove people nuts.
Yeah. I think I do have that problem. I think that getting sober, maybe part of like my addiction or whatever was like being busy with the podcast, and I'd like work on this and everything now. Like every day I'll work on it for a little bit and everything. I do. I remember my mom when I was younger telling me, Emily, I think you're going to have a problem with drugs or alcohol or something, because you can't, she literally said to me, you always have to be stimulated. Like you always have to be doing something. And I was like,
maybe you have ADD.
That's fucked up, Mom. Maybe. My sister has ADHD, I think, or ADD. But I do really enjoy, I do struggle with like relaxing and stuff. And that was part of and that was like one of the only times when I would just like sit and like watch TV or just like do nothing, was when I was hungover.
Right. So
that was an interesting.
Do you feel guilt now when you're, instead of just sitting there and like being, do you feel guilty? Like, oh, I should be doing something, or I should be doing that. You know what I mean?
I always feel that way.
Yeah.
I always feel that way.
Yeah. And me too.
So clearly I have some things I need to work through. I feel like I feel like my self-worth is wrapped up in my productivity.
Right. Yeah. I hear that. And that's when I was high, I could do that. I just get high and fucking watch TV and giggle and be like totally cool. But now it's like being sober and doing the exact same thing I did when I was high. It was like, oh, I feel guilt and anxiety because I'm not doing something, or
right. Yeah.
I don't know if that's an ADHD thing or just a sober thing or what it is, but I'm getting better at just being like, fuck it, I'm going to sit here and I don't care.
What I want to work on, and like this is something that once I'm like a little more healthy from my being sick right now, I really do want to establish a practice of like meditation or breath work, and really, because I've heard that I talked to another guest who said like he has this angst, right? Like that's this like feeling, and he's like, once I started addressing that through meditation, he's like, that actually helped bring those feelings down. And I was like, I need to work on that, because like that's how I feel. I feel like that's my anxiety in the pit of my stomach, is this is like, and I want to work on that next.
Qigong's good too.
What the hell's that? Qigong.
It's like QI Gong, I think. It's kind of like Tai Chi.
All right.
And it's like Tai Chi while meditating, and like it's a bit like yoga. Yeah.
I like that. I like the idea of incorporating movement with that. See, it's because the idea of just sitting there and being still terrifies me. I'm like, I should be doing something with my body. Like I should be moving.
Right. I should be flailing.
I don't know.
Exactly. That's better.
This is amazing.
I'm productive now. I'm productive.
Exactly. I brought down my blood sugar through exercise. Like that's seriously how I feel. I feel like I always have to be like doing something like with that.
Wasn't Emily nice? Isn't that just a wonderful story. And thank you, Emily, for that. I always appreciate my guests. I always appreciate their honesty and their vulnerability. But you guys never know. Emily and I may collaborate again in the future sometime. I don't know. I liked her company. I don't know if she liked mine, but we'll see. We'll see what happens in the future here. Don't forget, next week I'm speaking with my friend Sarah from Dubai about her illnesses and diagnoses and some of her traumas. So stay tuned for that. Please do me a huge favor. Tell people about this podcast. Tell about all the episodes you really enjoyed and all the ones you think people would really like. Please tell other people. I'm seriously really trying to make a living doing this, and currently I'm making $0 on it. Also, rate and review. By rating and reviewing, it gets the podcast seen more. It gets a little more notoriety, and I can get some more wonderful guests by the notoriety. Some high profile people, whatever. So yeah, please do that, and I'll see you next week.